Welcome to the 80th episode of the GameFor Podcast. In this episode, we'll talk about how to handle toxic gamers in tabletop gaming. I'm Adam.
And I'm Matt.
And this is the GameFor Podcast. GameFor is a platform to help connect tabletop gamers and to help you get more out of your tabletop gaming. Matt and I are part of a software development and design company called Milkcan. And because most of the folks at Milkcan love tabletop games, we developed the GameFor app and launched it in early 2018. We launched this companion podcast in June 2019 to help tabletop gamers get more enjoyment out of their hobby. Due to the COVID-19 global pandemic, we hibernated the GameFor app in July of 2020 and plan to bring back a retooled version of the app for Android, iOS, and web when gaming in person is safer. Until then, we'll keep bringing you this podcast to help you get more of your tabletop gaming.
Indeed. Even though it is getting closer, but at the same time, I know that it's still going around, but yeah, crazy.
Yeah, you're talking about COVID, I'm assuming.
Yes, sorry.
Not just
not the toxic gamers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, no,
right.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's amazing that I keep hearing people who are like, oh yeah, no, I got it. Oh yeah, and so that's the thing that we keep seeing, even though
I got it after
society thinks
forever.
that it's over, but it's exactly
3 weeks ago, I think now, 4 weeks ago, somewhere. Yeah. It wasn't. I luckily had trained my immune system to fight it off, so it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't a good time. I'll say that. But
yeah, I understand that. Yeah. What else have you been doing besides training your immune system?
I have been going crazy. So when people are like, "Well, what about can we do GameFor for places that it isn't going crazy?" And I'm like, I would love to, but we are super busy right now. So
yes,
which I mean, good problems to have, but I've not been able to game much at all this past 2 weeks. In fact, my wife's out of town in Montana, which is, I think that took them like 22 hours to drive to, but they stopped along the way, so I don't know exactly how much drive time, but they took buses out there. She went with like a church group or something. They did do some volunteer work but yeah, she's gone for the week, so then I'm flying solo, and it's like the last week of like some summer classes that my older two kids are taking, and last week of baseball. I've got softball going on, and for baseball, I'm coaching my youngest son's team. He's got 2 teams he's on. So yeah, it's been kind of a crazy little bit of summer, but I'm hoping I'll after this week, like this holiday weekend, a lot of our commitments are dying down. So I'm hoping I'll kind of get to enjoy a little bit of summer. Not that I haven't enjoyed so far, but
sure.
But yeah.
A lot of people ask me, I get this a lot from people who don't live in the Midwest, and they're always like, why is there so much tabletop gaming in the Midwest? And it comes down to the fact that we have these kind of pretty long winters.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of time where you're not going to go out and play baseball or, a lot of different things and whatnot,
right.
Soccer and all that. And so therefore tabletop gaming gets real big. But in the summer though, especially if you got kids and especially if you got several kids, it's
there's like
my brother and I were
2 or 3 months.
Super.
Yeah, there's like a 2 or 3 month window where like everybody tries to get everything done.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. Yeah, the summer is when you're like, oh, we got to do all these things. My brother and I were not super into sports. Like I played t-ball, I think, for a little bit, which I didn't particularly enjoy. I think my brother played soccer for a while, but otherwise we weren't really into the organized sports. So my parents didn't have to drive us around a ton, I guess, which I suppose is, it is what it is. But yeah, so it's just that's the thing is that for the most part in the Midwest, if you want to do outdoorsy type stuff, you generally try to squish it in all into like kind of 3 months,
right?
Unless it's ice fishing, I guess. I don't know. Did any of the schools have like ice fishing competitions and stuff like that? Not that I know of.
Maybe up north. Maybe like
I guess.
And people are like, "You are up north." Like, no.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
We're way up north, and like it's funny because like when we're like, "Hey, up north," and then people that were like, "Oh, they're up north," they go, "No, you got to go up north." And
yeah, it's a different up north.
Yeah, the less you pronounce the th in north is
right
how far north you go. Up
It's up
north.
north.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Indeed.
so
Yeah.
yeah, that's me. Yeah. How about
hmm
yourself?
I've also been busy, but not with kids and all that kind of stuff. I've been busy indoors mostly. Let's see. I was working on a skeleton assassin paint thing on Twitch, which I've finished now. I mean, I still need to varnish him and then maybe put a little tiny bit of like not static grass, but those little tufts, that you kind of glue down.
Mm,
I might put a tuft on his base someplace. I'm not sure yet. But now I'm working on Twitch on a 3D printed fishman that my friend Christopher sent me, which I'm amazed by how, like, I really don't see any like striations or lines, which even, usually even in 3D prints, like good resin 3D prints, if you get close enough, you can be like, oh, there it is. You can kind of see it, but this is really good. He's got and his printer's not like super fancy. We were actually talking about it at TMX because he was at
hmm
TMX running. He ran Necromunda, and he's got an Emax, I think is the brand. It's not like an Elegoo or a Photon or any like any Cubic or whatever. It's a brand I hadn't really heard of until he told me about it. I think it's called an Emax,
Okay.
and I think it's not even necessarily a 4K screen. I think he said it's a 2K screen because it's a bit older. But man, it did really nice work or something. I don't know. So yeah, I've been painting that guy. He's fun. I probably got another couple of episodes maybe before he's finished. Although this upcoming Friday is going to be my 2-year anniversary of hobby streaming on Twitch. So I
Wow.
got to figure out something to do. I don't know what, but something
Some
fun.
kind of party.
I was going to say I could just wear a party hat, but then I would bang it on the camera all the time because it's like
Oh,
real close to my head.
yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, let's see here. Last week on Saturday, I took a bit of the morning and built 2 of the kind of boss guys from the Horus Heresy, Warhammer 30K
hmm
box. There's like 40 regular Marines in there and 10 Terminators, and there's like a Contemptor Dreadnought and a tank, but there's also these 2 guys that are kind of like supposed to be leaders, and I think they're called Praetors or something like that. And I decided I want to use them for a different game, so I built them and I gave them different heads and different shoulder pads and got rid of their dumb capes. I don't know. I'm just sort of over capes on guys in power armor. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they're sort of fun to paint. I get it, but I just was like, no, I'm going to leave that part off. So I got some I don't want to say flack. I got some teasing from some folks on the internet about it because I posted a picture on Twitter and they're like, you can't leave off the capes. That's what a shame on you." And I was like, "Well, it's my models. I can do what I want." But I'm going to use them and some other Horus Heresy models to build 2 small forces for. There's a game called One Page. Well, it's a company called One Page Rules. I
hmm
don't know if you've probably heard of it. And they've got a sci-fi game that they call Grimdark Future, and then they have a game called Grimdark Future Firefight, which is kind of like small skirmish scale as far as that's concerned. And I think that my 2 army lists, each of them is maybe 4 models each, which is awesome. So yeah, so that's my plan, is to work on those and then do some Grimdark Future Firefight with them. Maybe even eventually do some battle reports. I've been asking my people on my Discord recently what kind of battle reports that they like to watch as far as
hmm
like video format. Like, do you like to see, static cameras, handheld camera, top
Oh,
down
okay.
camera,
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. So that,
Like
but like I said,
a
hmm?
steady cam held by the actual minis.
Oh yeah, or like a head cam, like
Yeah,
a
head cam.
GoPro.
There you go.
But yeah, so I did all of that, and also, yeah, that was, like I said, just on Saturday morning, because otherwise, all the rest of my free time lately has been nonstop layout mode for the new game that Vince and I
Mm.
are working on. We're hoping to get it out. Our plan right now is to get it out by the end of July, but we will see because we got to we you know, there's art that's coming in, and it's coming in a little slower than we would have liked, and it may mess up our schedule, but we'll see how it goes.
Got it.
So yeah, pretty
Have
much
you released any details yet to the general public or?
people have been asking about the game for at least a good 6 months on and off, like on
Yeah.
streams and things like that. It's science fiction based. It is skirmish. It's got solo and co-op built in from the beginning, but it will also have like adversarial mode, where you can play against your friends.
hmm
Um, that's pretty much about it right now. So yeah,
So you didn't tell them about
but
the pink elephants.
no, nor the robot squirrels. No, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's been a lot of work, and we're hoping to get it on time. And if not, then well, it'll be a little bit later. And
Nice.
then we've already started working a little bit on the next game that'll come out in
Ooh.
2023. So
Dun,
yeah,
dun,
we're
dun.
indeed. So yeah, it's been fun. It's
That's
been
awesome. See,
it's been good.
that's why I don't feel completely bad when I'm like, I didn't have any tabletop gaming, because you do more than enough to to cover both
Well,
of
to
us
be
and then some.
except that I haven't like actually done any gaming in the, like since the last time that
Oh, that's true.
last time I played actually with Sam. We played some Warcry,
Mm.
but I haven't played since. But I've been, like I said, I've been busy with mainly it's been the layout stuff. Like
Okay.
I sort of felt bad building those 2 Praetors or whatever because I was like, wow, I should really be doing layout right now. But I'm like, I really want to do these guys, and it's Saturday, and so I did.
Yeah, that was kind of
You know.
that, yeah, I've had a couple of those where I'm like, "Oh, I could probably sneak down and airbrush some stuff, but I really should get this other thing done." But
Yep. Yeah, no, it's always something, isn't it?
yeah. But, hey, this
Um,
way you can be like, "Oh, it's work related, so I need to go do that."
yes, that's technically true. Um,
All right. So,
so there's this term that's been thrown around. I should figure out. It'd be interesting to do one of those Google searches where you can see like when a term started showing up in Google searches, and
Britney
then kind of like,
Spears.
what?
Britney Spears told everyone that they were toxic.
Oh, yeah. Well, sure. I guess that we can
That's not the
let's
origin
credit.
myth we want to go with.
I don't. No, I don't know. Maybe I'll credit Brittany where credit is due for sure. Why not? But yeah, so we're talking about toxic gamers
Hmm.
in this episode. Now, a start off kind of point. There is the term can be used in different ways. One way is referring to a fandom,
Mm,
or a community. Like, oh, the people who like this game are very toxic, or
yes.
like people talk about like the toxic fandom of like Star Wars sometimes or whatever stuff
Mhm.
like that. And that can be a thing, and that's not anything we can do anything about because that's not like generally like the best that anybody can do is try not to be that guy or that girl. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so there's that. So that's what we're looking at right now. Well, we're not looking at that. We're not looking at how to fix communities that are toxic, in different types of fandom, different types of whatever. What
Right.
we're talking about is things that you can specifically control in your local gaming group
Right.
or whatever.
Right. And yeah, not like the guy that's like forgot one rule and now you've banished him forever from showing up at Friday Night Magic. But
Right. And toxic is also sometimes to some people, it can be a little bit of, I don't know. Some people will throw that term around as well
right.
as just like, oh, that's toxic. And sometimes people are throwing it around as a joke or ironically, or whatever. But other people will throw it around and be like, that's not technically toxic. That's just that person maybe just doesn't like to play the game the same way that you
Mm,
do, or maybe that person's bad at the game and you're like, I don't know. But generally toxicity, and it can appear in all kinds of tabletop gaming, but it is generally things that are kind of ruining the game, things that can be specifically like targeting certain people, and also things that can kind of wreck the game for the rest of the group depending on the type of game that you play. Obviously there are games that generally are played with larger groups.
hmm.
Board gaming and RPGs obviously kind of go in that direction,
Hmm.
whereas if you're playing a miniatures game, specifically a miniature war game, it's generally one-on-one,
Hmm.
but not always. And Magic the Gathering, whatever, collectible card games, Pokemans, all that kind of stuff, those are also generally mostly one-on-one, but not always, obviously. And I don't know so much about Pokemon, but in like I know that Commander is quite popular now these days
Right.
in the Magic community, and then you're usually playing that with at least 3 players, if not more. It's not. I mean, every once in a while, if you're feeling, fat and sassy, you and a group of 7 other friends will sit down and play a big, massive game of uh, Commander. But usually, by the end of that game, someone is going to be thought of as being toxic. It seems like it's just, I
Hmm.
don't know if it's percentages or what, but man, I have, and I don't even play that much, but when I was trying to get back into Commander there for a hot sec, I got into some big games at the game store that reminded me why I did not like to play that group or that game with that big of a group. So yeah. Anyway, so we wanted to go through and kind of talk a little bit about like how like what kind of can be toxic in different types of games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're more the role player than I am. So what kind of things end up being toxic in role playing? And this is amongst a group. Again, not we're not
Yeah.
talking about, oh, Pathfinder fans are toxic. We're talking about, oh, Dave in our group is toxic
Right,
or
right,
whatever.
right.
So,
Yeah.
sorry,
Oh,
Dave.
there's so many because
Hmm.
you get the personalities involved, and then it goes from there. But like like it's trying to give away the plot. Like some people will like, especially if you've got like a pre-made campaign book or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some toxic players will go and read those ahead of or do something that they know about, and look up cheats, hints and stuff online, or like spoilers, I guess would be the best term for that, and try to give that away, or use that to their advantage, and screw up everybody else. um which is never fun. I mean, that just kind of
Sure.
ruins the whole mystery and adventure part of it. It's like reading the last page of a mystery book to see who killed this
Right.
person.
Hmm.
Not needed. But it's like there's the ones that like sit there and will try to become the center of attention and aren't the GMs. The ones that are like they'll argue every rule. They'll try to be funny and really are not funny at all, and it's not really in context or appropriate.
Yeah, I've come across that before.
Yeah,
People they're like making cracks that are like lines and memes from like I don't know like TV and movies and stuff like that. And I
yeah,
just
like the
and
first
it's
time someone,
fine to some degree, but if it's like if especially if it's out of like no, I don't want to say out of character, but like if it's
yeah,
supposed to be like a really spooky place, and then someone's like, "We're gonna need a bigger boat," or whatever. Like we're not even in the water. What are you talking about?
right,
Just like yeah, yeah,
yeah,
or or
and
or
it,
funny like
or
Monty Python stuff in the spooky that yeah exactly.
maybe the first time they do it, it's like, okay, that's funny, and then they keep repeating that line,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
yelling Leroy Jenkins for the fifth time is just, oh yeah, no.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean.
It's the stairway to heaven in the guitar shop of role playing games.
Right. And there's also people that are like not the GM that like maybe they GM sometimes too, and so they're like I don't know.
Yeah,
Sometimes
they'll
it's a
tell
power
people like
dynamic. You know what I
you
mean?
can't. Oh, you can't do that. That's not allowed. Yeah, they'll like try to
Hmm.
like dictate the rules and a bunch of other stuff.
And you're like, you're not currently the GM in this game, so you don't. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So yeah, it's basically going against the group dynamic. I think is the overall um, theme that we're kind of getting at, because there's definitely, like, I've been in some campaigns where it is very lighthearted and funny, and
Hmm.
and the kind of the out of character pop references is kind of everybody's okay with it, and then there's ones that people are just that's just not the mood that they're going for. They're going to try to really immerse themselves and stuff. So
It's important to know the room to
right,
some degree. You know what I
yep.
mean? Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Then there's the ones that try talking over other players, that or dismiss other players, basically like are like or tell people what their character is actually doing. Like, no, you're not doing that. You should go over there and do this.
Mm.
All the time, like,
Hmm. Hmm.
be like, no, like basically to the point where you're like, why are the rest of us even playing? It sounds like you've got this all handled. So
Right. Yeah. 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 No, I definitely. Yeah. I mean, being a group collaboration and telling a story, it is important for that collaboration word to come to the forefront because it is definitely there are folks out there who do, and I don't know if it's like a control thing or whatever, but definitely I've seen players and I haven't played as many RPGs as you, but I used to play more back in the day, and definitely you would get people who would kind of try to like, you have the GM and or the DM or whatever, and they're running the show, obviously. And then you usually have somebody in the group who is kind of like sort of the leader to some degree, and different group dynamics have different, setups. Sometimes there's multiple leaders. Sometimes it depends on what's going on. Sometimes it's completely leaderless, which can sometimes go a little, rudderless as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when there's like kind of a structure, and then this other person is like, well, I think, yeah, you're the leader, but I'm gonna, and that can be a problem. But then also just constantly almost like discounting what other people are trying to do in the game, or different ideas and things like that, and talking over. It's just, I don't know, it's a problem.
Right.
Hmm.
Let's see what else. Like extreme metagaming, which we're kind of talking about that a little bit with the pop references, but more of like the kind of doing stuff out of character that don't really it doesn't really make sense. It kind of takes the role playing part out of role playing game. Like the easiest to explain would be like having a like low intelligence, low wisdom character that's for some reason seems to know everything about
Hmm. Hmm.
archaic stuff. And I've caught myself doing this too. There's like
Hmm.
that's why sometimes we'll have to roll. Uh, I don't want to say smart guy people, but I like I sometimes try to play characters that are a little bit more crafty, so that when I come up with a fun, clever idea, it doesn't go completely against what my character would have come up with.
Right, you're not limited by like your character's intelligence stat or something like that, and going, well, I came up with this idea. This is a good idea, but but Chonk the Barbarian would not
Right.
necessarily come up with this idea. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
no, I
Chaunt the
get it.
Barbarian is probably going to just walk into the trap. He's not going to, or poke the statue that's just standing there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whereas I was, I'm approaching it cautiously and blowing some dust to see if there's any fingerprints on it or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like I like the term metagaming. Amongst the group that I used to play with and just stuff like that. Like, yeah, the I know something that my player or the I know something that my character doesn't know is kind of part of it. Earlier when you were talking about like, oh, I have already read this book. I've already read this adventure, so I know all the tricks and traps, and so therefore I'm going to play in
Yeah.
a way that I'm like ignoring, like, oh, well, there's this rug in the middle of the room. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to step on it. I'm going to walk
Right.
around the rug. And they're like, why do you walk around the rug? And they're like, oh, no reason. And you put the book that you also have of the same adventure back into your backpack, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Or, like, well, let's search this room for traps. And like, okay, cool. And like, let's do it again. Let's over here under in this bottom drawer. And then as a GM, you're like, all right, what's going on
Yes.
because you've already read the book. So that's also, again, it's a game. Role playing games, I think, are very different in that there are people out there who are trying to win, and I don't know that
Yeah.
that's the point. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And again, different strokes, but still,
It's the friends you made
yeah,
along the way. Yeah.
indeed
Yeah.
it is. So yeah, these are all different types of things that can be, I think, pretty toxic. There are people that will be in your group sometimes, especially if you play amongst good friends, then this might not be the case. But even if you do, sometimes people act very differently in a tabletop gaming environment than they
Hmm.
do in just like hanging out and doing stuff kind of environment. Like
Right.
they're more competitive than you may have realized or something like that. And so, yeah, that's something that can really kind of pop up and just be like, this is messing up the game for kind of everybody. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And then there's board games. In board gaming, and I have played board games with people who are just absolutely like just so well known amongst our group for this very issue, specifically this kind of first point, just not paying attention. Like, I can't tell you how many times you'd be playing a board game and then all of a sudden it'll just get real quiet and we'll all be staring at one person and they'll be like, and this is even before like smartphones and stuff like that.
Right.
They'd
Right.
just be like, I don't know, like looking at a magazine or doing whatever. And they'd look up and they'd be like, whose turn is it? And I'll be like, yours, it's your turn.
Oh,
Like,
well, what did
oh,
everybody do?
right, exactly. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, God. What was that game with all the cards? Dominion.
Oh,
There's a
jeez.
guy that we wouldn't play with anymore
Oh.
in our group because he would just like sit there and watch everybody play until it became his turn, and then he would look at his cards and then be like, Okay, what am I going to do? And that's not what, no, see, that game kind of needs to move quickly. And
Yeah.
it generally, what happens is by the time it gets to you, you should have already been thinking about that. And so you go, okay, I'm going to play this card, switch this over to this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I got 3 victory points. Okay, your turn. Like, it's supposed to be quick because
Right.
it's just the nature of the game. But, watching everybody play, getting to you and then going, what should I do? Like, that drove us nuts. And that makes people not want to play the game. That's what a lot of this toxicity does, is it makes everyone want to go, let's not do that anymore. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. That's the big issue.
Absolutely.
And nowadays, obviously, again, like I said, when I was talking about that was pre kind of smartphones and whatnot. To some degree, it was like early smartphone time, but now, everyone's got a supercomputer at the end of their wrist or whatever. And, yeah, being on a smartphone, being on a tablet, all that kind of stuff all the time while playing the board game. I mean, if you're looking something up that has to do with the board game, I don't know, a rules clarification or something like that,
Right.
great. But if you're not, then what do you could go over there and doom scroll, and that'd be fine. Then we'll play this game over here, that kind of thing, like that.
Yeah.
And again, once in a while, you're like, oh, I got to look this thing up I got to make sure when to pay my taxes or water bill or whatever, and it just came into your head, so you're like, I'm just gonna look this on my phone, it's not my turn. But if it's something that you're doing all the time, then that can be toxic behavior because you're messing up the game for everybody else. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, there's some people that can multitask. Like, I know that I
Sure.
had 2 friends that would sit there and play, Ascension during
Mm-hmm.
when it wasn't their turns, but they also played
Ascend-
their turns, like, super fast. So they would play, like, the
Ascension on their phones, you mean? Like
yeah,
the
they
card game
yeah,
app? Yeah.
yep, and then,
Mm-hmm.
so they would, like, pass it back and forth and do that while they're playing the board game, but they also were generally, like, doing stuff really quick on their turns, and to be fair, there was another player who was kind of doing what you said, where like it would get to their
Mm-hmm.
turn, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what were you doing this whole time?"
just, you look inside their head. It's just like one of
Right.
those monkeys with the symbols.
So
Just
so then
sending
you're
themselves.
like, yeah, I can understand why. In order to not rage on him, you're finding some other stuff to make the downtime not seem so
I
bad. So
mean, and this is kind of the thing about toxicity, and we kind of touched on this with the RPG stuff. If nobody else has a problem with it, like I said, every once in a while you sit down with a group and you're going to play, I don't know, a role playing game or something like that, and everybody's throwing around like memes and lines from movies and
yeah,
TV
yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that, and you're all having a great time, then that's not being toxic. But
Right.
again, you got to read the
It's
room.
it's going against
If
the group dynamic, or the
Exactly. If
yeah.
you can sit there and play a smartphone game with another person there at the table and be running that completely in parallel while you're also running the game and it's not having any effect on anybody else in the game and you're all having a great time, then that's not toxic.
Mhm.
It's when you're doing that and you're ignoring the game that you're supposed to be playing as well. And everyone else is like, come on, Dave. I don't know. But yeah, I honestly, I don't, well, I
There's
was going
like
to say,
3
I've never
days right
played an
now. Be
RPG.
like, is that him talking
Yeah,
about me?
I've never played an RPG or board games with a guy named Dave, but that's not true. But I haven't seen that guy in years, and he was generally a decent dude. Anyway, so yeah, yeah, that's the trick, and it's difficult. Like, we can make this list, and some of you are probably going to be like, yeah, but that doesn't. We do that all the time. That's not a problem. And as long as everybody's on board, like if for some reason you had an RPG group together and you loved, like, the GM and all the players
Mhm.
loved metagaming. Like, you'd want to just like speed run through, like, modules that made by Wizards of the Coast. I guess
Because you're
if you're all
leveling up
cool
your
with it,
players or something, yeah,
I
or
suppose, sure. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you're trying to like get something over on the Adventure League. Is that what it's called? The Adventure League? The
yeah,
the
yeah,
thing? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how all that works, but yeah, if everyone's cool with it, then it's technically kind of not toxic. It's when it's the toxicity is when it's ruining stuff for other people
mhm,
is a big deal. You know what I mean? Um, and then, not paying attention to rules explanations, like, again, and this is sort of tied into the other ones.
yeah,
If you're like on your phone doing stuff and you're not paying attention to as the rules are being taught in the board game, and you're like, wait, what does this do again? How do I,
mhm.
but there are people who are just, they just weren't thinking about it.
Right, right,
I
right.
mean, if you have a hard time, like if you've got, like a condition of some sort, you've got ADD
AD
or ADHD.
ADHD, yep.
I've got a condition where I can't say those. Um, but if you've got issues like that, that's a different story, and I get that. But if it's just like you were just thinking about candy, not even like a person named Candy, but just you sure do love,
If
I
it's a
don't know.
person named Candy, it's fine. That's
No, wait, but if you like, Jawbreakers and Tootsie Roll Pops or whatever. I
Yeah,
don't know. You were just thinking about stuff like
and it's
amongst my
not
friends. That's a
Candyland.
line like when there's just like nothing going on in your head. You're like, what were you thinking about? Candy. That's just always what happens amongst our
Nice.
friends. So
Okay.
I think someone asked a kid that one time, and that was the response, and we thought it was funny. So, nonetheless, my point is that if you're just not paying attention for whatever reason, and then you're slowing the game down, you're ruining the game for everyone else because you didn't pay attention to the rules or whatever. Again, it's the same deal. It's the same kind of
Hmm.
toxicity, and that makes people not interested in playing.
Yeah. And then
Um,
another one for board games,
yeah, yeah,
letting like pieces, or especially like dies, and this happens with some role playing and stuff like that too, like constantly go off the table. Like, like they're rolling
yeah,
stuff, and it's like, okay, yeah, let's like settle it down there, buddy.
right, yeah,
Like you don't have to throw it across the table and hit Cheryl in the eye and
hmm,
and fling it off the punch table bowl, and yeah.
yeah. No, I know what you mean. I mean, that's sometimes it's just someone who's bad at coordination, hand to
Right.
eye coordination, I suppose. Yeah, but I agree. There are people out there who are just far too vigorous in their, specifically in the dice
Yeah.
throwing, and yeah, sometimes you can see it in the board game too, like in the actual board. You can be like, wow, has Dave been playing on this one? Or because you're just like a bunch of dents in the board. You're
Yep.
like, what's yeah, that's why I've never liked metal dice because I'm always like, if you ever play like a board game or anything that has a board game type of thing, like like the boards that come in like Warcry and Kill Team and stuff like that,
Mhm.
they're like board game style boards.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you use metal dice and you roll on those, they just dent the board and you just get all these little dents and everything, and
Yeah,
it
it'd be
just
like
looks weird.
that,
I don't know.
the new Ben Shot, glass that has the metal D20 in it.
Oh, sure,
You
yeah,
know what
yeah.
I'm talking about, right? The
Mm-hmm.
from everyone else is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, there's a local company, but they're getting fairly popular, I would say, at least in North America.
Yeah.
They have like they originally started it with like pint glasses, and it looked like a bullet was shooting into the glass, so it was like dented. But then they started
Mm-hmm.
doing like golf balls, and like I got one that was a hockey puck. But yeah, their latest one is a metal D20 that looks like it's penetrated it, part of the glass and stuff. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. I agree. Um, Collectible card games. Now, you've played far more collectible card games than I
mm,
have, but I I know that for sure an issue that has driven me nuts about collectible card games is sometimes the rules are not the interpretation of the rules
mm,
is different amongst different folks, which is why when you go to a big tournament and stuff, from what I've been told, is I've never been to a tournament for CCGs.
hmm
There's a judge, or multiple judges,
right.
where you're asking for
Yeah,
rules.
yeah. Even some bigger shops or decent sized shops for on Friday Night Magic will have judges, because I
Mhm.
think you have to do so many hours to move up and stuff like that. So now with the
Oh,
whole
like in
ranking and
judge
stuff,
level and stuff.
yeah. Now with the whole
Hmm.
ranking and stuff, especially for Magic, it's gotten to be where there's more judges than there used to be,
Hmm.
from my
Hmm.
understanding.
But it's like a I'm trying to say, it's like a readjustment of the rules where people are like, there's times when, and I've seen this before, where like this rule applies when I want it to, but it doesn't apply when you want it to, a little bit. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and it's because, again, like, because specifically with Magic the Gathering, and I don't know, again, anything about Pokemon because I've never played that card game or the Yu-Gi-Oh or any of those other ones, but I know that timing is really super important. Like the way that this happens and then this happens and then this happens in Magic, and so I think that's one of the benefits to some degree of playing the video game version of it a little bit, is just that you can't, the computer's gonna be like, yeah, you can't do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, no, that's not how that works. Whereas you can definitely, and I've seen people do this at shops, be like, no, that's not how that works. And another person's like, yeah, no, it is. That's how that works. This is what it's done. I'm sorry that you haven't played enough before, but that's how this works. And you're like, and that can be real toxic because it drives people away from the game
Hmm.
because they're just not interested in going down that road.
Right. Yeah. When you bend the
Yeah.
rules, yeah, and this applies so much outside of Magic
Oh
too.
yeah. It's not just, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's very true.
we had this just our last baseball tournament. It was like we had a rule apply, and we're like, okay, that's a weird way to interpret that, but if that's how you
Mhm.
guys are doing, okay, fine. And then the exact same situation happened a little bit later, and they tried bending it the other way, and
Mhm.
we're like, no, that's not no, like it's one way or the other. But yeah, yeah, when it's like a house rule, but not out, yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, don't do that. So, yeah, play, yeah, interpret rules how you'd like others to interpret your rules.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. When you were playing more back in the day, did you have people that would show up that were always bringing tournament decks, or did like everybody bring tournament decks, or
Oh,
like
I
was
was.
it mostly casual or
Usually it was more casual, but yeah, you'd have like the one guy and nobody wanted to play, and then he would complain that nobody wants to play and this group sucks. Um, yeah, like going in on a fun night to stomp people isn't great. But
Mhm.
then, also going the other way, if you're showing up at a tournament and you're like, hey, I just open up a starter pet deck, let's go. So that, everybody who plays against you is basically going to be guaranteed to win. Then it screws up the rankings and laddering and all that
Right.
stuff.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That's not fun either. So
Didn't they used to have tournaments where everybody just started with a starter deck or two or something like that?
yeah, there's still a lot of times with your release parties, or like parties
Events.
events. Thank you.
Mhm.
That's kind of like I c they'll do, like, drafts and boost. I don't know if they've got true starter decks like they did back in the day.
No, that's true. Yeah, back I'm showing my age there. Back in the day when I used to play, initially it was yeah, you bought those like I think they were like 60 card starter
I was
decks.
gonna say
Yeah.
60, and it had, like, 10 mana and 1
Mhm.
rare, and yeah, yep.
Yeah. But nowadays it's just all boosters. But I'm assuming that there must be. I'm assuming there's still booster drafts and stuff like that that happen. But I think a
Yeah.
lot of times regular tournaments, especially the big tournaments, it's about bringing your A game best deck that you probably spent a bunch of money on and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And if you then take that deck to your local gaming group down in the basement on a Saturday night, other people were like, could you not bring that? Could you not bring that kind of violence in here, please? I'd
Right.
appreciate that if you would just bring in like a cool deck or something. We're all just trying to have a good time and maybe drink some sodas or beers or whatever. Yeah, and then there are players like that again, and this is something that also does also kind of resonate amongst all four different genres. Well, maybe not so much role playing. I don't think that role playing you don't like because you're not really playing against each other. So I don't know if someone is like, oh, I'm going to bring in my super dialed in character. I mean, there's min maxing obviously, but
Mhm.
it's not as much. It's more in the competition. Again, it also doesn't happen in board games. Now that I mention it, so let me take that back. It does not happen so much in board games and role playing, but it definitely happens in the next one in wargaming. People who roll up with lists that are obviously, I mean, we can just get into it here. Bringing a tournament list to casual games, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
With wargaming, especially when you're playing adversarially, you're playing against each other,
Mhm.
and there are, a big portion of that is to some degree, and I think we've talked about this before. A big portion of that is kind of the expectations, the negotiation. Like there is a social contract to some degree when you sit down and play a game against somebody, whether it's a friend of yours that you've known for a long time or somebody you've just met. Um, like what kind of game are we playing? Are you trying to practice for a tournament? Because if I show up with a super casual, stupid list that I think is a lot of fun,
Mhm.
you're not going to want to play against it because you're trying to, oops, I just bumped my mic. You're going to want to not play against it because you're trying to um, practice for a tournament and you
Right.
need other tournament players to practice against.
Right.
On the other hand, I'm just like trying to having a good time. I'm here to have a fun time and stuff like that. And if we don't talk about it ahead of time, then and that can just be a misunderstanding. That's not necessarily a toxicity issue.
Right.
Where it becomes toxic is when you have that discussion, you think you're on the same page, and then that's not the case. Then they still like, I've got a friend, and I don't know, again, there's levels to toxicity to some degree too. I've got a friend who I generally don't play games. I won't really play 40K against him anymore. A, I don't really play 40K much anymore at all. But B, I'll be like, let's just bring super, super casual lists, just
Mhm.
super casual. And he's like, oh, totally. I'll totally bring my most casual list. And it will be the most bone breaker kind of like just like tournament style because he just doesn't know how to like dial it down. He just doesn't. and that, I don't know. Sometimes that's toxic, and sometimes it's not, and it depends on how good of a friend it is of yours and things like that.
And
And
the attitude goes a long way. Like if they're
to
like,
some degree, yeah, yeah,
yeah, if they're like, boom, oh, you died, man, you really suck at this game, versus
right.
like,
That's
oh man, like you were just not getting any rolls today, type
yeah,
thing. You know,
exactly, exactly.
there's ways to do it. Like, you know, I still remember to this day the when I was coaching, let's see, they were probably 6 year olds at the time, maybe seven, for soccer. And this other team just destroyed us. He brought his like A team. There was like kids that just never played the entire game. That were sitting there like across from each other, rolling a soccer ball back and forth to each other because they were so bored.
Hmm.
And if they were keeping score, it was probably 18-0 or something like that. We scored one goal, which was fantastic. I absolutely loved that when we scored the goal. But like, at one point I was like looked over, I'm like, really, dude? Like, uh, you know, can you like lighten up a little bit? And he's like, can't take the foot off the gas pedal once it's down. And I'm like, what? So
Yeah,
I definitely would never want to play tabletop games with that guy. Or maybe I would,
no,
because I
no.
probably would destroy him
Well,
there. But
maybe.
yeah.
There was a brief shining moment at the very beginning of you telling that story when you were like, it was 6 year olds, maybe 7 year olds. And I had this image in my head of you just like scoring on a 6 year old goalie, like repeatedly over and over again, like in practice. I don't know why, but I did.
I'm so awesome. I'm gonna try out for the
Exactly.
World Cup now.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's the thing. I say this a lot, and I keep saying I'm going to put it on a T-shirt, and I haven't done it yet. But games should be fun.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the point. Like that's yeah. If you had fun, you won,
yeah.
and I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, no, I understand that.
Oh,
Rules lawyering is
yeah.
another thing
Hmm.
in tabletop wargaming that you hear about a lot.
Mm.
You hear about it in some of these other genres too, but I think it's probably worst in wargaming because there can be so like with board gaming, you're like, well, things are a little bit more like you're moving along a track or you've
There's
got a very
there's
specific kind of
more
rule set.
finite. You're right. Yeah, like versus like
Exactly.
yeah. There's so many more gray areas when you get to wargaming. Like,
Hmm.
well, is, you're like, do a measurement, and you're like, is he in range? Is he not in
Right.
range?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, if I use two different tape measures, it comes out different.
Hmm.
Then it's, close enough. Yeah, and most of the time, your fellow gamers will just kind of be like, yeah, that's good enough, or like, no, I'm not really there. We'll just say he's out of range, or something like that, or I can't see you, or yeah, you're undercover. They'll just kind of like, in the spirit of the rules and the game, we're just going to make a decision and call it good. And then,
Yeah.
you try to balance
Absolutely.
it back out later on or something like that. But yeah, you get to toxic one who's like the laser's out, and he's like, technically, that no, you didn't make it because it's micro millimeter off.
Yeah. Exactly. I think
And
it. Yeah. Like a millimeter off. Yeah. I mean, then that's the thing is that like it becomes a situation where winning is so important, win at all costs, which is a big term, WAAC, win at all costs. That's it's a big thing that happens in wargaming, and yeah, the rules lawyering is definitely a way to try to get more potential wins in your column as a wargamer. And I love the war games where you're playing with somebody and they're like, I don't know, am I in range? And they're just like, yeah. You're just like, yeah, no, you're pretty close. So let's say, and you were trying to get in range, and so let's just say, yeah, because if we're always in range, at least something's happening. The thing that's kind of dull in wargaming is just like, well, you almost got in range, but you didn't get to shoot. So too bad, And I don't know, like
mhm.
if you're just like, it's more interesting if you shoot at me, and then maybe you'll miss, but maybe I'll dodge it, or but maybe I'll take a damage, or that kind of thing.
Right.
And so,
And especially
I mean,
like, there's some times when you're like, well, yeah, I can move up to 5 inches, and I moved like 4.5. So you're like, well, if I knew you were going to be that petty, I would have moved the extra like quarter of an inch, or
Right. Exactly.
to do it. Like, I just thought I was close enough. Yeah, especially the ones like the games where they're like, oh, there's no pre-measuring allowed. Like,
Hmm.
why?
Which
Yeah,
thankfully
what is?
most games don't do that
Yeah,
anymore. But
right.
yeah.
Yeah, like what's the point of that? What is that? Who does that really help?
Yeah. It's interesting because again, it's kind of that social contract. Like if you've got one person who's just permissive of everything, you're like, yeah, you're probably close enough. Why don't you take a shot? And then the other person who's constantly kind of trying to rules lawyer and trying to eke every last bit out of it, that won't go well. You know what I mean? Like if they're both being real cool, then great. If they're both being completely, absolutely rules lawyery down to the millimeter, well, I mean, at least they're on the same page and they're kind of expecting it, but it's the mismatch that has a tendency to cause the problems. Um, and then in all of the types of gaming, not just the four main genres of gaming, which are, role playing, board gaming, collectible card games, and tabletop war games, in all types of gaming, there are specific things that, like, 'cause a lot of these things we've been talking about, some people might be like, oh, well, our group does that and it's fine. It's not toxic. And that's, there's, again, levels of toxicity. And there's some, like, well, we think this is toxic and this person doesn't think that's toxic and that kind of
Right, right.
stuff. But there are types of things that are toxic in all games.
Yeah. So one, and I don't see it on our list, so I
Mm-hmm.
thought about it as we were going through some other ones. But like you know, not not having respect for for another person's property. Like if you're
Sure.
playing someone else's board game and you're bending the cards or eating
Mm-hmm.
over them, you spill a
Mm-hmm.
drink. I mean, and it happens. If
Sure, there are accidents,
like if
but if
you
it happens a
accidentally
lot,
right, then you shouldn't be eating, or first ask if they're okay with you doing it, and then if
mm-hmm.
you ruin someone's game, at least offer to pay for the reimbursement and stuff like that. Doesn't mean
Yeah,
that they'll
yeah.
always have to take you up on it, but yeah, I mean, again, do what you would want someone to do if you ruined their game, or, if they ruined your game type stuff.
And
So
there are some people that are just like weird about people touching their dice. So
mm.
if they're like, "Hey, don't touch my dice, dude," then just don't touch their dice. It's fine, but you're not ruining their dice, really. Now, if you've got
Well,
jelly all
you
over your
might wear out
fingers,
my critical hits.
that's not actually a thing.
There's only
But
so many allowed.
you've got jelly all over your fingers, then don't touch people's miniatures or
Right.
dice or cards or anything like that. Sure.
Right.
And also, if you break something, that's a different story. But either way, whether it is actually something that you're doing that's going to possibly damage stuff or whatever, or just like don't ruin my dice's mojo.
Yeah, you're checking out somebody's paint job, like, look, but don't touch. Like, look with your eyes, not
Sure,
with your
exactly.
hands, and,
Exactly.
like, that kinda
Things
stuff.
that you should have learned in kindergarten. But yes. Um
But the toxic
yeah.
players did not.
Yeah. I think the next thing, then, of course, kind of moving up the scale of things that are toxic in all
Mm.
of these things is cheating, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
There are folks out there. I've played in so many different games with people who are fudging dice rolls, or if it's more of a miniatures game,
Mhm.
they are they're not good at math all of a sudden. They're like, oh, we're playing a 200-point game, but somehow you have 220 points worth of dudes. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, oh, shoot. Yeah. Uh-huh. And and if it happens once in a while, it happens. I'm bad at math. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Um, but if it's constantly the case that you always have an extra 20 or 30 points or whatever, then that's not necessarily
Mhm.
just being bad at math. Right. So, um, there's a lot of things that you can do cheating wise to try to win a game that's really not that important. It's a game.
Right.
Again, you should be having fun.
The only time that I've been like, "Oh, yeah, that's okay," is a co-op game and you guys are all, like, okay with it. Like,
Right,
you're
exactly.
like
If you're playing a co-op game, hey,
"Come on, really?
let's just both cheat. Yeah, it's
Let's
fine.
just pretend we didn't see that card come up because
Right,
we're
yeah.
dead and the game's over." Uh,
If you're all on the same page, that's the thing that's great about tabletop gaming in comparison to video gaming. If you were playing some sort of co-op video game, the computer wouldn't let you cheat. But if you're playing a co-op video game and you want to like have more fun, but this thing is going to ruin the fun in your mind, and you all agree, then be like, yeah, we didn't see that card,
board
or
game.
yeah, that was a 10. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and then obviously the worst is specifically rude comments and behavior
Mm.
towards other players in the group or towards anybody in that situation. So we're talking about stuff like sexism, racism,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. That
Yeah.
stuff is the most toxic and can't
Absolutely.
be really
Even
tolerated.
in not necessarily like the people that are sitting around there, like it's just not needed at all. Like, if it's all guys, still don't need to make sexism comments. Like
Exactly, exactly.
you can't go, well, we're all guys here, so we're allowed to do. No, probably not.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably not the kind of behavior
Like,
that's
I'm a guy and I'm not gonna like it, and so there you go. You know
right,
what I mean? Like,
right.
it's just yeah. So that kind of stuff, it seems obvious, but it is definitely not. It's there's a lot of these other things that I'll let slide due to just like, well, maybe that's just a personality flaw that this person
Right,
has or
right.
whatever, that kind of stuff. But there's certain things you just can't let slide, and that's the worst in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Um, so now that we've determined a whole bunch of different things, they're toxic, different layers, different levels, all that kind of
Time
stuff.
to go
What
home.
kind of yeah, exactly? Yeah. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
checking out the podcast.
This is
Uh,
depressing.
there you go. So what kind of steps can you take? Like, what can you do when you've got a toxic player of
Mhm.
whatever flavor in your tabletop group or whatever?
You should
Um,
sit there and just, suck it up.
just suck it up. There you go. Yeah, no, there are levels again to some degree. So
Right.
it's not just like this is what you do, step one, done.
Right, right, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's there, yeah, but yeah, if you're like, okay, if someone's doing something that you're like, "This is toxic, it's ruining everyone's time," you know, just you've gotta say something, say
right,
something to
exactly.
adjust something. You know, sometimes the person really doesn't understand that they're doing it or it's out of context, or
Right.
something, but
We were talking about reading the room before. Maybe they're just not good at reading the room, or
mhm,
they thought they were, but they were wrong, or whatever. You request that the toxic player just like kind of changes their actions, and you do it like right there, like right during the game. Just be like, "Hey, dude, can you like just?" And you don't want to necessarily. Maybe kind of the thing is that, and we'll get into this when we talk about how to communicate in this fashion. But it's not so much like, "Hey, can you stop this?" or something. It's you kind of have to twist it a little bit. We'll get into that to a second, but um
mhm,
if and again, like we've talked about, there's layers, there's levels. If it's not too bad, if it's like you have to kind of make this sort of judgment call and go, well, you know
like
you
that,
can maybe
yeah,
skip this first step where you call them out like as it's happening in the game, but it's a,
right,
it's a good idea generally to try to do it, especially if it's more extreme. It's a good idea to do it right now because you want to kind of nip that in the bud and get
mhm,
that idea in their head. It's kind of like like when a dog does something they're not supposed to do. The dog goes to the bathroom on the floor, like, I don't know, half an hour ago, and then you yell at them for it. They're like, I don't know what you're yelling at me for now.
right.
Because like if you did it right away, then they're like, oh, this I should. But if you're later on, they're like, I don't know, man. I've been asleep for 20 minutes. I don't know what you're. So yeah,
All
it's
I
kind of
can
the same
think
thing.
of is like leading the guy over and like, "These dice on the floor, you did this. Bad player,
Exactly.
bad."
Exactly. I don't know that you should necessarily try that, but maybe whatever works for you. But yeah,
Right.
kind of making that determination and kind of deciding that, and then making the actual effort
Right,
to say, look,
because
this is the issue.
not only does it help them maybe stop doing what they're doing, it also will help you and everyone else that's uncomfortable from just getting angrier and more upset
Hmm.
about it. Like, if
Exactly. Yeah.
like, and it could be something that they'll just go, "Oh, okay, yep, I will stop that." Like,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then that's it. It's done, and everybody's having a good time again.
And also, if you can, maybe like get humor involved in some fashion. That can help soften the blow sometimes. It's sort of tough, but if you can pull it off, it could help make things like don't not like make fun of them, like make a joke in their at their expense. That's not going to help but I'm saying if there's some way to like kind of work in a bit of humor, it may work, it may not. Um,
Mhm.
if this first kind of step though is difficult for you, because maybe they're a good friend, and you don't want to like call them out on this,
Or
or
maybe they're
something
not
like
a
that,
good
or
friend, but they're
whatever.
a good friend of a good friend type thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, certainly, for sure. Then the trick is then to try to talk. Or if you did this, use it like, hey, could you, hey, whatever. And then they don't follow that.
Mhm.
Then later on, either way, you want to talk to them privately, like
Right.
afterwards, and be like, look, this is kind of, and explain that and go from there. Um, it's important because like sometimes that first one works out great, and then they don't do it again, and then
Mhm.
everyone's happy. But if it doesn't work out, or if you decided not to go that route or whatever, then definitely the sort of short private talk makes a lot of sense and can do a lot of help.
Mhm.
And then honestly, if that doesn't work, then like there's plenty of folks that I don't play games with anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and and it's just because it's just not, there's I've tried these things, it's not worked out.
Right.
Sometimes it's a situation of you're on different pages. Like I have played back in the day, I would play 40K with people at the shop sometimes, and I would play with them once and be like, well, I'm not going to do that again. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, we have different interest areas on what's going on and how to play and all that kind of stuff. And it's
Mhm.
just good enough not to do that anymore. But other people, again, if they're friends, you gotta, if you want to keep playing with these friends of yours who are friends in other ways besides outside of gaming,
Mhm.
you need to have this kind of
Yeah,
conversation if you can.
or family members. I know, like, for a while there, I couldn't play board games with my brother because, if he was winning, it was okay, but if he was losing,
Mhm.
then it was like just anger and
Right,
to the
exactly.
point where you're like, I don't really want to win anymore. So yeah, it's not fun to play. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, but when you're trying to communicate all these different things, these other three previous
hmm
possible steps, direct blame is not going to help for the most part. Sitting there and saying, "Well, you're doing this, or this is your fault." It's technically true, you know what I mean? But
right.
if you're trying to like kind of soften that blow a little bit, or kind of, you know, maybe make it easier to swallow or whatever, if you instead say, this is making this person feel bad, or this is making me feel like this, or whatever, explain how the actions that they are doing are affecting the group and the overall, play experience. Or if it's a one-on-one game, like, if you're playing Magic against just one other person, if you're playing like a war game against one other person or whatever, explain like how their actions are affecting you.
hmm
Don't say what, don't tell and again, if you just want to be like, you're a jerk, well, okay, then you're probably not playing with that person anymore. But if you're
hmm
trying to like be more constructive and also potentially, I don't want to say soften the blow, but a little bit, make things a little bit more palatable, then, maybe trying to show them the if they have any empathy, this is what your actions are doing,
mm
and kind of phrase it from that way. um
Yeah, that.
that can help.
Yep. You could also kind of like do general, like, kind of define the group expectations better and be like, hey guys, we only have like a little bit of time to game,
Hmm.
so we're trying to get through this as fast as possible so we could play some more games. So if everybody should be ready to take their turn when it's their turn, or
Yeah.
if everyone can focus, where like maybe probably everybody knows exactly who you're referring to, but you're not directly calling that person out, so they can kind of hopefully take the hint.
Yeah. And that's again a little bit of the social contract thing too.
hmm
Exactly. Exactly. Now, the thing is if the player, when you talk to them and say, hey, this is how this is making the group work, and it's making it, this person doesn't like, or whatever the deal is, again, you've given them this information. You haven't said, hey, you're being a jerk, or hey, you're doing all this stuff wrong. You've done that. And now if the player doesn't seem to care about that, about how their play style or their actions are affecting other people,
hmm
well, now don't you? And so at that point, now it becomes a situation of going, oh, okay, so you don't have any empathy towards the other people in the group, and you're just going to play the way you want to play because you keep it real. Great,
Right.
okay, awesome. But now don't you? So you can take steps from that. If the player is a good friend, which we've talked about a little bit, just a bit of ago, then sometimes it's best to start the discussion kind of in private after the gaming session.
hmm
I think, like, if it's a good friend now, and again, there are times when a good friend of yours, you have a relationship where there's like, kind of like some ribbing and like some like teasing and stuff, and you can be like, "Hey, stupid, don't do it that way. You're being a jerk, and everyone else hates it," or whatever, and
Yeah,
they
or
can
like,
take that
yeah, hey
well.
Arnold, well, how about we keep the dice on the table this time? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And there's the things like that too. But sometimes it's a situation where you're like, "Look, you need to stop. using that word that you keep using because, but whatever. But it's better, I think. I don't know. It depends. Sometimes it's better to do that separately, and that's obviously a thing that can happen. I think it depends on it again. If it was, again, someone using a slur, I'm going to tell them right off the bat. I don't care whether I like them or not. Hey, you know what I mean? But there's different kind of things, and you have to sort of I don't want to say eyeball it because you're not really looking at it, but you know what I'm saying. You have to kind of gauge it to some degree based off of the relationship with the person, the group dynamic, and a bunch of other things. But it is important to make an action. It is important to do something and not just let it fester. You know what I mean?
Right, because that's when it's really that toxicity becomes comes to fruition because it's ruining and making everybody else have a bad time.
Exactly. The most important thing, I think, is to try to make sure that the person understands that what they're doing isn't really good for the overall play experience. And like I said before, if they're like, well, I'm having a good time and I don't care how it affects other people, well, now you know that person is probably some sort of sociopath or something like that. And at that point, it's probably not a bad idea to just be like, okay, well, we're not going to play together anymore.
Right.
And that very possibly happens. You know what I mean? If it doesn't work, like I said before, it's time to break up and go separate ways. It's just time to okay, well, you have to be able to, because what'll happen otherwise is that if you've got this toxicity, it's a good word, it's like if you have toxicity in the body, it can cause the rest of the body to get sick. Right. And if you have this one piece of toxicity in the gaming group, it can kill off the entire gaming group. No one will actually die, I don't think, probably, but it will break up the group. And so you need to be able to either fix that toxicity or kind of excise it, I think.
Right. Yeah. The problem's going to solve itself one way or the other. So you might as well make sure it gets solved the way you want it to.
Solve is maybe it will come to fruition. It may not solve, but yeah, exactly.
One way or another, people won't game with that person anymore. So
yeah, that's true. So I don't know. You folks out there in the audience, I don't know if you've got any tips on how to deal with toxic players.
We're probably the only ones, Adam.
No, that's a good point. I think that you and I are the only people who've ever had any kind of toxicity in gaming. That
everybody else is what are they talking about?
Everyone else is just like, this is always just roses and candy. So yeah. But thanks again for listening to this episode of the GameFor Podcast. If you've got questions or comments and you're watching on YouTube, please leave a comment below. If you're listening via your favorite podcast player or just aren't into the whole YouTube comment section thing, then you can feel free to reach out to us via email at podcast@iamgamefor.com. You can also keep up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And check out our website at www.iamgamefor.com. That is www.iamgamefor.com. Thanks.